Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're getting into something really fundamental for modern homes, something you might not even think about much.
hmm But it basically powers the whole smart living experience.
Exactly, the electrical panel.
Yeah.
But specifically, we're doing a deep dive into pre-assembled smart electrical panels.
Yeah, it's sort of the hidden central nervous system.
Yeah.
We've been looking at insights from a systems integrator and also an interior designer who've actually worked with these things
Right. So our mission today is to figure out what makes these pre-assembled panels different, why maybe the old way isn't always the best way anymore.
and really pull out the benefits, especially if you're looking at smart home tech like KNX or DALI.
Yeah, think of it as understanding the brain of a smart house, maybe, getting the inside scoop from people who actually install and design around them. Okay, so let's start right there. When our sources say pre-assembled electrical panel, what are we actually talking about? It's not just like an empty metal box showing up.
No, definitely not. That's the first big thing they pointed out. A pre-assembled panel, it's a complete distribution board, custom built for the project.
Okay.
But the key is pre-assembled. So it's not just parts in a box. The assembly, the wiring inside, the labeling, even testing and initial programming, that's all done off-site.
Off-site, like in a workshop or something.
Exactly, in a controlled facility, not, on the construction site where everything's dusty and chaotic.
Gotcha. So it arrives pretty much ready to connect.
Pretty much ready to install, yeah.
Yeah.
And that includes the really complex stuff like the logic for KNX automation systems. KNX is that big global standard for controlling homes and buildings.
Right, I've heard of that.
And the setup for DLI lighting control, too.
Yeah.
DLI lets you control individual lights really precisely. So protection circuits, checking the power phases, even setting up, technical bits like bus couplers and group addresses for how devices talk to each other. Sometimes even integrating a home assistant server. It's all configured based on the project plan before it even gets delivered. Which brings us straight to, well, maybe the core question from the sources. Why even change? Why not just assemble it on site like electricians have done for ages? What's wrong with that?
Yeah, you'd almost think building it right there would be simpler, wouldn't you? Or at least more flexible.
That's kind of the old way of thinking. But what the sources told us is, well, the reality on site is it's less controlled. It definitely takes longer.
Okay.
It can be noisy, disruptive.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's just much more likely errors will creep in. You've got an electrician working with tiny wires, maybe in bad lighting, dust everywhere.
Right, not ideal conditions.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Compared to doing it in a dedicated facility, almost like a lab environment.
Where it's clean, methodical.
Exactly. It's a cleaner process, much more systematic. And crucially, everything gets tested, properly debugged in that ideal setting before it goes out the door.
So for you listening, the real takeaway here isn't just, some technical detail. It means a faster installation in your home. Cleaner, safer, too. It cuts down on those potential headaches, those hidden wiring problems you might only find later. That seems like a pretty big deal. Okay, now this is where I think it gets really interesting. Because the first thing I think is, right, custom-built, pre-assembled, fully tested, that's got to cost more up front, surely.
Yeah, that's the totally logical assumption, right? And our sources definitely talked about this. But the surprise, maybe, is that it can actually end up saving money on the total project cost.
Okay, how does that work? Let's work on site.
Well, yeah, that's a big part of it. It comes down to predictability and efficiency, basically. That's what the sources kept stressing. Because the panel shows up, finished and tested.
Right?
The actual physical installation time on site is way less.
Yeah,
And time is definitely money on any building project.
for sure.
Plus, you get a fixed, transparent price for the panel itself. Because all that complex assembly, the tricky configuration, it's done off-site. So you avoid those nasty surprises on site that blow the budget.
Ah, okay. Fewer unexpected labor costs.
Exactly. Way fewer hours needed for the electrician to be standing there debugging or troubleshooting while the clock's ticking at your house. And, this is important, it really cuts down on needing electricians to come back later to fix problems found after you've moved in. Those return visits add up.
So it's less about the panel sticker price maybe and more about predictability. Knowing the cost won't suddenly balloon because of electrical issues, that's huge.
That kind of certainty is incredibly valuable, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just cost. These panels, they're built from the ground up to speak the language of modern smart homes. That was another key point.
How so? Like integrating things like KNX for the automation or DALI for the lighting, those sound complicated to set up.
Well, they are complex systems, no doubt. But that's the beauty of it. The provider of the pre-assembled panel handles that complexity. The big benefit for you, the homeowner, is that all that tricky configuration, setting up how devices communicate, the bus couplers, defining which lights or blinds work together using group addresses, all those technical layers, the provider manages that based on your project needs. They're the experts in KNX and DALI.
So wait, does that mean I don't need to become some kind of tech expert myself just to get my smart lighting or heating to work properly?
Exactly. That whole technical headache is lifted from you. The system arrives already programmed to do what your designer or integrator planned.
Okay.
Whether it's automating heating zones, setting up specific lighting schemes, controlling blinds, the panel basically translates your wishes into the correct commands for these systems.
That's quite appealing.
And the sources also mention things like built-in remote access potentially being configured too, which could make future tweaks easier.
Something else that came through loud and clear was reliability. Why is testing it off-site such a big win for making sure it actually works reliably?
Well, because it's tested as a whole system, in that controlled environment, before it even leaves their workshop.
Right.
So any potential slip-ups in wiring or maybe a faulty component, they catch it and fix it there, not after it's already installed inside your wall.
Okay, makes sense. Fewer failures once it's actually running your house.
Exactly. Our sources really emphasize how much this reduces those frustrating, why isn't this working, moments later on.
And reliability goes hand in hand with using it long term, right? What about things like documentation? Or if something needs fixing years later?
Yeah, good point. And this was another area the sources highlighted as being maybe surprisingly important. You get proper documentation with these panels.
Like wiring diagrams.
Detailed wiring diagrams, lists of all the device addresses, all the technical info you'd need. And here's a really neat practical detail. They mentioned putting QR codes right inside the panel cover.
Oh, interesting. What for?
Well, imagine a technician needs to troubleshoot something years down the line.
Yeah.
They could just scan a QR code inside the panel.
And it pulls up the info for that specific part.
Exactly. Maybe diagnostic info or the specific wiring diagram for that section instantly.
Wow, okay. That's smart.
That level of built-in info is just invaluable for future maintenance or upgrades or even just figuring things out. It makes the whole system much easier to manage long-term. You're not relying on someone remembering how it was wired years ago. It's quite forward-thinking.
Let's shift gears just a little. We also heard from an interior designer. So from their perspective, how do these panels fit in? It's not just about the techie stuff, is it? There's an aesthetic component too.
Absolutely. That was a key insight from the designer. I mean, these panels have to physically go somewhere in the house, and they need to look, well, acceptable.
Or at least be easy to hide.
Right. And the designer pointed out that these pre-assembled units often just look better. I know it sounds weird for an electrical panel, yeah, but they tend to be more compact. And the inside layout is much cleaner, much more organized than something put together bit by bit on site. That makes them easier to integrate visually or conceal neatly.
And space is always tight, especially in renovations.
Always. Our sources mention some clever designs to save wall space too, like double-level setups, where components are mounted on 2 layers inside the same panel footprint.
Stacking them vertically inside?
Yeah, and the internal layout isn't just random wires. They use proper labeling, careful cable management. The result, tailored to the space available, is just neater, more orderly, which actually even makes future work inside the panel easier too.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Our deep dive into what the sources say about pre-assembled smart electrical panels. It's shown us quite a bit.
Definitely. We've seen how building and testing them off-site really changes the game for installation. Faster, fewer errors compared to the old way.
Right. And maybe surprisingly, it can lead to better cost control and transparency for the whole project budget.
And they're built to handle complex smart home stuff like KNX and DALI right out of the box, taking that technical burden off the homeowner.
Plus, they seem more reliable because of all that upfront testing and much easier to maintain down the line thanks to really good documentation like those QR codes.
Yeah, that was a neat touch.
And even the look and the space-saving aspects matter, as the designer pointed out. It fits better into the home.
So as our sources suggested, it's really more than just a technical choice, isn't it? It kind of underpins a whole modern way of living. Efficiency, control, peace of mind, maybe?
Yeah, that analogy one source used really stuck with me. The panel as the home's future-ready electrical brain.
I like that.
It's the solid foundation that enables everything else you want your smart home to do. Not just today, but, for years.
Which really brings up a final thought maybe for anyone listening who's planning a build or a major renovation.
Yeah. how much thought are you really giving to that core infrastructure, that electrical panel? It really dictates what's possible, how reliable it'll be, how easy it is to change later.
It makes you think, doesn't it? What does it really mean to have that brain installed, fully working, debugged, documented right from day one?
Definitely something to consider.